Hi, everyone. I just want to welcome you to this conversation tonight. I know for me, this is a conversation I've been deeply invested for years. Every year goes by, I learn a new thing about how, not just poverty or what we think poverty looks like, about how it impacts kids. And I know it impacts families, and it most definitely impacts senior citizens. But for kids, so much is impacted in their lives at that young age that changes the trajectories of their life, right? And we have school right here, and we have kids all around us. So although more conversations to come on families and elderly, tonight's focus is really on children. And we are thrilled that you're here. I hope that you really get those 5 points of credit if you're in Becky Draper's class. I heard, because that's like a super bonus right there. So we welcome you to Pierce. We really want this to be a night where we learn, where we maybe dispel some myths, where we just get our hearts and our minds changed and then do something about it. Because if we just have conversations and it doesn't propel any action, then why have the conversation? It's just kind of wasted air, right? So at the end, we're going to talk about how you can get engaged. And you don't have to go to Pierce to get engaged. You don't even have to be from this county to get engaged. You can do it right where you are. So through tonight, let me tell you how the format's going to go, because this is the last time you're going to hear me till breakout sessions. Becky's going to talk for a while. You'll probably see the biographies of everyone on the sheet. We're going to go in sections. The first section after Becky we're going to talk about is how housing or bedding affects a child, right, and what programs are out there that are helping that. Then we have a breakout after that where you're going to sit down with your peers and have a conversation, right, in small group, like talk about what you learned about. Then we come back and we're going to talk. Did I do that backwards? I did, because Josh has to leave. We're going to do food first, because if you're hungry, we're going to talk about food. Then we're going to talk about housing, and then we're going to talk about hygiene, which, in my opinion, is probably the thing most of you know the least about in this room, except for Scarlett. And it's been eye-opening to me to learn about that, so I hope that we learn a lot and you feel inspired to do something about that tonight. Then Dr. Abby Monroe is going to talk about brain development, because it's not just the issue, like what is happening to the brain, and then we're going to hear from some of our school social workers in Churchville Chi-Li School District, and then we're going to talk about what we can do. So that's the format of the night. I'm going to turn it over to Becky, and up here it's just going to feel like a conversation, so not super formal.
Thank you. The other thing is we are going to have a chance for question and answers for our guest speakers later on. And so we actually put up an area over here. We're going to put out some Post-it notes, but you can also, if you need writing utensils, we have them. You can start jotting down if you have specific questions for our guests. So that way we can kind of help if there's a lot of people with the same question, we can make sure that question gets answered. So be thinking through and be willing to put some stuff out there so that we can have that question and answer time near the end of our time together. So, but again, thank you. I want to say as well as Karen did, thank you all for coming. This is really exciting that we have such a great turnout tonight. And to anybody who teaches over at Roberts, I apologize that Karen just called out how much extra credit I was willing to give my freshman students over here. And I may have bought pizza for my seniors as well. So I'm sorry if I'm she shamed me. I don't want anyone. Any of you students go back and say, remember how much extra credit Dr. Draper was giving for this tonight? No. So I do. I teach over in the social work department here at Roberts. And so talking about poverty and helping people come to a better understanding of poverty is it's my job. It's what I do every day, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. So to get tonight started, what we wanted to do and what I thought I would do is spend just a couple minutes. I could spend the rest of the night, but I'm only going to spend a couple minutes talking about certain things that I think it's important that we understand or recognize about poverty. And when I say that, one of the things that I do recognize is, especially for somebody who's never really experienced poverty for themselves, some of the things that may be talked about tonight might challenge your beliefs. They might challenge your understanding about those who live in poverty. We actually want that to happen because we know there's a lot of myths out there about why people live in poverty or how they get there. And if that happens, I just pray that you're open to just listening to a different point of view. And just instead of shutting down and thinking of all the reasons why what we're talking about isn't really true, just letting it kind of soak in and maybe taking some time to process. I think that's just a really important thing that we can do tonight. So let me give you just a couple of things. I work social work isn't really a social science, but we look at things in terms of understanding through a social science perspective. And one of the things that we often talk about is the difference between relative and absolute poverty. So I want to just lay that out and kind of what that means and what it looks like for people. The concept of relative poverty is simply somebody looks poor in relation to another individual, okay? So we compare people and what we think their poverty looks like. And how this comes into play, and I think that we do this a lot, is that we look at poverty in America and we compare it to poverty in like a developing nation. And when we do that, our poor don't look so poor. People from Pierce are very familiar with people from Nzige in Rwanda. We help support individuals living in Rwanda in a very small, impoverished community. And if we take that comparison and we look at people who live here in Chilai and we compare them to people living in Nzige, our folks, they don't look that poor. But we can't look at relative poverty. We have to look at absolute poverty. And absolute poverty describes households where the income level is not sufficient enough to keep people at a healthy standard of living. So they lack the means, the financial means, to provide for their food, for their housing, for other things that are required, kind of just basic standard of living things that people need. Especially in our communities, this is kind of hidden. We don't always always see that so clearly, like we would see it if we went, overseas into a developing nation. But we know that people right here in our community live in absolute poverty, that is something that they face every day. And that's why we have people coming in today. Our guest speakers work with individuals, work with kids that live in absolute poverty all the time. We need to hear what their stories are and how it impacts them. So the next piece, and I gotta do this really quick and that stinks, but where do we get our ideas of what poverty is and what poverty looks like? We get them from so many places. We hear politicians talk about them. It's part of our social media. It's part of our regular media. We hear about it on the news. We learn it from family. We learn it from friends. And especially, again, if you've never really experienced poverty for yourself, we come up with these ideas of what it might be. But we have a lot of myths about those who live in poverty. And I just want to hit a couple of those really quickly because I think this is important. One of the biggest myths I think that is out there is that we look at people who live in poverty and say that they're doing something abnormal or maybe something wrong. Social media, even just regular media. I think about the movie and the book Hillbilly Elegy. I don't know if anybody's ever watched that or read the book, but it's a true story about a young man who lived in poverty. And the poverty came from generational substance use and mental illness. So oftentimes we go, oh, people are poor because they are addicted to drugs. People are poor because they have criminal records and now maybe they can't get a good job once they're out of jail. People are poor because they have significant mental illnesses and that impacts their ability to do whatever it is they need to do to pull themselves out of poverty. But the reality is about 58% of American adults, not children, adults, will spend some time in their life living in poverty. Now, it may be just a short period of time, but 58%, sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little less, depending on what you look at, will live in poverty. 58% of the American population does not have drug addiction, significant mental illness, or a criminal record. It happens to just regular people who are struggling to make ends meet. So we can't just blame it on abnormal or wrong things that people have done that have kind of pushed them into poverty. So that's one of them. Another thing really quickly, we think about poverty and we think about the inner city. Like, oh, poverty is so concentrated in the inner city. And poverty is an issue within our inner cities, but only about 34% of people who live in poverty actually live in an inner city community. 17% live in rural communities, which then means that 49% live in suburban or what they call, what's the word that I saw? Small metro communities. I'm assuming that means like Batavia or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but 49%. So most people who live in poverty are living right outside of these doors. We don't have to drive to Rochester to find them. We don't have to drive to really rural counties. They are right here. So that's another thing. One of the other ones, we like to think of America as a land of opportunity. That if we work really hard, we stay motivated, and we make good decisions, that we can become anything we want to be. And while that's a great ideal, and I wish that that was the way that our system works, The reality is that there are a lot of hardworking people that are unable to pull themselves out of poverty, that they work a lot harder than we would ever expect. A statistic that I saw recently is that 44% of jobs in the United States are low-paying jobs. So 44, almost half the jobs that are out there are considered low-paying jobs. And low-paying jobs, one, don't pay you very much money to pull yourself out of poverty. They don't give you benefits like health insurance, paid time off, and other benefits that we consider really important. So there are a lot of hardworking people out there in the US that are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs, but really struggle to pull themselves out of poverty because the opportunities aren't there. So living in poverty does not mean that you're not trying hard or you're not making good decisions. It means that you there are structural things that get in the way of you pulling yourself out of poverty. So the last thing really quickly, and I think that this is an important one too, is that oftentimes people look at, it's kind of going back to that idea of relative poverty. We think that people living in poverty in the United States are pretty comfortable. And I've heard this so many times that I've heard like, well, I know so-and-so and they say that they're poor, but their smartphone is nicer than mine. You know, their kids wear Nikes to school. They have TV, you know, they have a huge smart TV in their living room or whatever. The reality is that even if you took all the money, even if I took all the money that I spent on Nike sneakers for my kids, I would never have enough money to buy a car, to pay insurance, to put a down payment on a mortgage or to put a down payment on a house or something like that. So to look at people and say, oh, you must be comfortable, you must be okay because you have a couple of something that we perceive as being nice or prestigious does not mean that they're not living in poverty. It doesn't mean that they can't meet their needs or that they're making poor decisions. They're trying as hard as they can. And again, adding up all that money, it would take decades till they would actually have enough money to really make a difference if they didn't buy the smartphone or the Nikes or something like that. So this is really important to us, and it's important to understand these things because, bless you, because poverty has lifelong implications for individuals. The longer somebody lives in poverty, chronic poverty, will actually decrease your lifespan. And we have statistics that show people who live in chronic poverty tend to live about 10 years less than people who've never experienced chronic poverty. Kids are growing up in it. We need to look at, tonight we're going to hear about the in the here and now impacts of poverty on kids. But if we're not addressing this, the lifelong implications of kids living in poverty are huge. They may not live healthy and longer lives. They may not be able to pull themselves out of that generational poverty if they don't have the opportunities to do so. So hearing these stories and learning more about it is just so important to understand kind of what families, what kids are going through. And that's the part that we really want to hear tonight from our speakers. So that's why I'm going to be quiet. Again, I could go for days about this, but I'm not going to. And we're going to welcome up our first speakers. So the first thing we're going to be hearing about is food insecurity. So we have 2 speakers, if you guys want to come up. I'll get my stuff out of the way. I'm going to let each of you kind of introduce yourselves. We have 2 people coming here from 2 different programs in Monroe County. You can talk a little bit about, I don't know, do you do rock, paper, scissors, or do you want to go? Josh, go first.
Josh can go first.
Just to talk a little bit about their experiences. So we really thank you all for coming, and yeah, I'll hand over the mic.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This microphone, mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. Incentives get students in the room every time. Always use incentives. Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for being present, and thank you guys for having me. My name is Joshua Wilcox. I am the Child Nutrition Program Specialist at FoodLink. If you're not familiar with FoodLink is the regional food bank, actually the largest regional food bank in the Finger Lakes region. We service 10 counties all the way from Allegheny. If you had, test my geography here, south is Allegheny County, all the way to York County, and I believe we touched also the Pennsylvania border as well. And at FoodLink, we believe that the fight against hunger and poverty is one and the same. And our mission is to leverage the power of food to end hunger and build healthier communities. And 2 of the ways that we do that is through our backpack program, which is where we send students that may experience food insecurity symptoms home with food on the weekend. great program, but it's not without gaps. One of those gaps being, what if that one child that's receiving a backpack has siblings? The food and the contents of that backpack is only serving that one student and not the family as well. And so we also have something called food pantries. And most recently, we started to develop school food pantries because prior to the pandemic, we realized that schools act as a resource hub for parents. A lot of parents look to schools for additional resources and services. And that was actually made more known during the pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of families looked to the schools for food and what was going to, how could they begin to feed their children and what's going on with programs and activities and different things like that. And so we allocated for funds and grant funding to be able to expand pantries into schools. And so pre-pandemic, we had about 7 school pantries. And since 2020, we've now opened up 22 additional school pantries. So we have about 29 school pantries operating right now, and that just meets the families where they are. We try not to have it be so discreet. We try to get all hands on deck so that it's not a stigma in terms of like accessing like food, emergency food. And some schools do that work very well with getting their sports teams involved and holding can drives and different things like that, and getting student volunteers to be in there for that kind of peer-to-peer leadership and different things like that. And so, FoodLink, one of our values is agility and innovation, and one of the things that we always practice and that we always want to do is be able to meet the needs of the community. I think that is all that I wanted to say. Nicole? Oh, and sorry. Nicole is one of the better operating school pantries at East High School. She came on board in our first cohort. We're now on our 3rd. As I mentioned, we're ever expanding our school pantry network. Nicole's from East High School. She does a very, very good job within her school with operating the pantry and making sure that students feel comfortable accessing the services, making sure that families feel comfortable, making sure that they have all their needs met, well, most of their needs met from A to Z, and really just being able to meet families where they are and help them when they need it.
Thank you, Josh. So my name is Nicole Gibbons, and I'm at East Upper and Lower School. So we have from 6th grade all the way up to 12th grade for students there. And so we are a community school, and you're going to hear your professor talk a lot about that. A community school is basically a school that has been in receivership. Basically, you're not doing well, so they give us funds to make it better. So we're in receivership, and right now we are under the umbrella of it's called Educational Program Opportunity, which is under U of R. It's just a big way of saying that U of R is coming and help fund, our school. FoodLink is one of our partners that comes in and helps us with stuff for the food pantry. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about tonight is how we go about letting people access our food pantry. First, I want to just discuss the city of Rochester. When you talk about East High School, we have an average of 1,054 students that go to school there. 90% of those students are economically disadvantaged. Okay, so I want to go there and talk a little bit about that. About 52% are African American, another 40% is Latino heritage, and then the rest are white or Asian, et cetera, or mixed races. So it doesn't discriminate the poverty level. We have students that come from the suburbs. Instead of an urban-suburban program, they come to the suburban-urban program, the other way around. And these are students that live out in the suburbs that choose to go to East High School because they want to experience it firsthand, what it is like to go to urban school. So you guys cannot see this. I apologize, I do not have a PowerPoint, but I do have tons of handouts, and they'll be available for you with the same information I'm talking to you about. So this is the dots right here. And within these middle dots, Josh, if you could just put your finger there in the middle dots, that's where most of the students from East High go. And if you notice, there are hardly any grocery stores there at all. Okay? So let me tell you exactly what East High School does. It represents children and families that live in a food desert. Most of you probably already know what a food desert is, but for purposes of making sure that I'm explaining it to you in an academic way, a food desert is defined as an urban area in which it's difficult to buy affordable or good quality fresh food. Many poor people that live in food deserts where there is plenty of food, and I hear this correctly, there's plenty of food, but none of it is healthy. So they can go up to the corner store and to the convenience store and get a Hot Pocket, and some fried chicken, and a little hot dog, but they're not getting any fresh produce, any lettuce or tomatoes and things of that nature. You're not gonna get that in a 7-Eleven or at, what's it called, Speedway? Is that the new one now? So those are what my students stop at on the way to school. And if they wanna grab an orange juice or some milk from Speedway, you better believe they're gonna pay about $3 for a gallon of milk in the inner city. Now, if you look at the statistics there, and Josh can correct me if I'm wrong, but for a low-cost family, let's start with low-cost families, and these are parents and families at our school. Low-cost families average about $1,025 a month in groceries, and that's on the low end. They're gonna spend about $1,300 a month for someone that's making a medium wage, and that's about $37,500 a year. So if you have a single mom that makes about $37,500 a year, okay, and now she just got her RG&E bill, and that's $400, and now she just got her water bill, and that's $50, and now she just got to pay her car payment, and that's $350 because your credit's not great, even though you work 2 jobs, okay? And then after you do that, you have to pay another $100 a month for your internet because your kid has to use the internet in school, and they're not doing free hotspot anymore because there's no more pandemic. So as you can see, this mom has a car. She works 2 jobs. She has children. She sends them to school. But how can she afford to buy groceries all the time? So she is locked into what you call a poverty level. And so those are the kind of students that I work with. So as everyone knows, Josh knows, we don't consider ourselves just a food pantry. We are a community resource center.
Right.
So that's what we do at East, and we've been working on that. The students don't like for us to call it a food pantry. They don't want to feel like they're standing in a welfare line somewhere getting food. I make it as discreet as possible. Here is one of the newer flyers. It says food market and not food pantry. In the folders that you guys are going to get, it'll say food pantry because it saves me on printing costs to give you the old flyer. Save some trees.
Yeah.
And then if you notice, I have the QR code there. The QR code there is they can have any adult that's with them that has a phone, or they may have their Cricket phone that they pay $120 a month for, their nice iPhone. That it might be better than my phone, probably way better than my phone. And they can scan on here, and their parent can go on and order groceries. And it comes directly to my email, and then there's 4 people in our building that are certified. So as last year I was the only one certified to do Food Link, why should I be the only one? So now I have the homeschool assistant who is certified to let people into the pantry, myself, and then I have the attendance person who goes out to visits families so he can take grocery when he goes to visit these families. And then we have one of our community partners with Center for Youth who is certified. Tomorrow we are having students come in, and I'm going to teach them about first in, first out. Josh, I like that.
Rotation.
Rotation. And how many inches food's supposed to be off the ground. They're also going to spend their volunteer time helping me put the groceries away and those type of things. But it's to be discreet. It's not to hide the fact that they need to go for a food pantry, but I have students come to me all the time, and they're scared. I have a hair clinic there where they can get their hair braided for free. We have a barber shop, and we also have a thrift store, which I guess thrifting is real cool now. So we have volunteers from New Hope Church that comes in and runs the thrift store for me. and comes in. So there's a lot of things, and I'll answer more of your questions in some of the breakout sessions, but that's what I do over at East.
Yeah, and so again, Nicole, as you just heard from what she said, her school pantry is really the flagship for what it looks like to run a school pantry very, very well. And in fact, we actually send a lot of our school pantries or potential school pantries, if you will, that are looking for, an idea on how to get started or how is it ran and kind of the ins and outs of running a pantry. We actually send a lot of those folks to Nicole so that they can see the good example that she sets, because one of the things that we also believe at FoodLink is feeding folks with dignity, right? Like we don't ever want someone to come in and feel like here's the food and you go on your way, right? And she also touched on another good note in terms of nutrition, right? We don't gone are the days of just giving families calories when they come to a food pantry, right? Like donuts and bread and things of that nature, right? We have a system in place to where we kind of categorize the foods that we offer to our pantries, and we offer something called client choice as well. Simply put, what does that look like? If there's a school that's predominantly Latino population, we want to make sure that that family has access to Goya products, because their family are more than likely going to eat Goya products than Chef Boyardee, right? So we just
And
want
only
to
had to bug them, I don't know how many times to get the Goya products.
exactly. We just had Spanish Heritage Month a couple months ago. So yeah, and just feeding families with dignity, making sure that we're giving them more than just calories, but offering them nutritious foods as well, and encouraging them to be able to, not just, get food from a food pantry, but also to eat healthful as well.
So I think we did our allotted time, but I can answer any questions that you have afterwards. I know Josh has to leave, so if you have any questions on FoodLink, I can take you show you how to get to the FoodLink website and become a partner. Yeah. Oh, stay here. Okay.
I'll just sit here, join your coffee table.
Yeah, please
Okay.
do.
That's really cool.
Water table.
I could sit here and talk to you guys like all night, right? Because it's fascinating to me. So you're going to go to small group, and here's what I want you to do in small group. And you have a number. I know you're all like, oh my gosh, who am I going to be in small group with? I'm not next to my neighbor, but you guys are all grown-ups. You can handle this now. So your number, you're going to go to your small group. On your way to small group, you can stop and get a snack and coffee, because we're actually, believe it or not, 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Very good, you two.
We got it like
Set
that.
the bar high. But in your small group, this is what I want you to do. I want you to talk about what they just talked about. Like, did you know that? Like, what was it I just said, Becky? Feed families with dignity. Like, what stood out? The other one is, it never occurred to me. How often do you go to the food cupboard and you are not going to find Goya products, right? Because I'm a white suburban, I'm probably buying the same food I buy, and I expect everybody's going to eat what I eat. Probably not, right? I never thought of that. So in your small group, I want you to, within a group, the first one is just sit in a conversation. What did you learn? What did you know? What do you maybe disagree with or agree with? This is a safe place. You don't all have to agree. You're just not allowed to argue out loud, okay? Okay. Okay, maybe a little bit. If you want to argue with Nikki, you can argue with Nikki as well. So group 1 is going to be over here. There's a circle. Group 2 is back there. Group 3, 4, 5, and 6 are in those other spaces. But feel free. There is both sweet snacks and healthy choices, because I knew Josh was going to be here, and he wasn't going to want to just eat cupcakes.
Josh is like, I want the donut.
second so that. Oh, there we go. There it is. Make sure that works. Yes, is that your first one after your intro slide? Okay.
Yep.
So I will give that to you. We're just going to be pushing on them right there to forward those. So whenever you're ready.
Want me to just go?
Yeah,
This way, so that you know. This one.
Okay, well, welcome back.
So you're not going the opposite way.
As we continue our evening, again, we've talked about food insecurity, and now we're going to spend a little time talking about housing insecurity. So we have two guests that are here, actually 3 total, but 2. And I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves because I will mess that up, and I don't like to do that. So, but yeah, so we're going to spend a little time talking about housing insecurity and what that looks like in our communities.
Hi, everyone. My name's Beth Bojarski. I'm the manager of Development and Community Engagement at Family Promise of Greater Rochester, which used to be RAIN, which some folks are more familiar with.
Let you introduce yourself.
I'm Leonette Rivera, manager of program services at Family Promise.
So I'm going to give a 5,000-foot view of Family Promise and family homelessness. And then Leonette is here for moral support, but also works directly with families, most especially in the shelter program. And so she's the one who will answer all of your questions. So I want to give you a sense of what I'm going for, because that's always really helpful for me. So what I'm going for in my sharing, I'm going to start my timer so I'm paying attention, is to share some sort of knowledge that may evoke empathy or compassion. I've been reading lately and thinking about how empathy is great, kind of like learning how to walk in someone else's shoes or match emotion, but it's not enough. When empathy ends, we tend to go one of 2 ways. One of them is pity or feeling guilty for what we've just learned, and the other is to build respect and admiration for that other person or group of people, which hopefully leads to action. So just wanted you to think about that model. So what I'm going for is knowledge, empathy, compassion, respect, admiration, action. So I'm going to start out, this way, that way. We start all of our meetings, board meetings, staff meetings, everything, with a reminder of our mission and vision. Our mission at Family Promise of Greater Rochester is to assist families at risk of or experiencing homelessness to achieve sustainable independence by providing person-centered, holistic services in collaboration with the greater community. We'll come back especially to what it looks like to be in collaboration. And our vision, which is also kind of on my shirt, is that we will have achieved success down the road when affordable, decent, equitable housing is seen as a human right and every family has a place to call home. It's a big dream, but that's what we're going for. Before I move on to the next slide, we do work specifically with families experiencing homelessness. Note, not homeless families, so they're not defined by their state, but they are families who are experiencing homelessness, which is different than chronic homelessness or individual homelessness. So a lot of folks, when they think about homelessness, they might think about someone who's on a street corner or living under a bridge. So we have all these biases and stereotypes. Families who experience homelessness tend to be pretty invisible, and there are a lot of them in our community. Families who experience homelessness are often doubled up with family members or friends. They might stay at a different place every night. So when someone calls into the office looking for services, we don't ask them where they live, but we say, where are you staying? Where did you stay last night? So it's a very different kind of way to exist. They might be in hotels or motels as long as they can afford it. More recently, a lot of families are staying in their cars, which it's starting to get cold out, so that becomes differently problematic. There was a family who called this fall who had run out of options and had slept on the sidewalk with her babies the night before. So that is starting to happen a little bit more, but it tends to be pretty invisible. The one thing that connects all of our programs is that we are serving families. So the family defines the family. The only thing that we require is that there is a child in the household. So that's where we really connect this childhood poverty. I didn't switch it. So family can be a single parent or a single guardian with a child or children. It can be 2 parents, it can be same-sex parents, it can be a grandparent, so whatever that family looks like for them, sometimes intergenerational as well. And we have 3 programs, or two really entry points. Our first is prevention and diversion, and that program ideally is working to keep families out of shelter, because shelter, while being as supportive and hospitable as we can make it, is traumatic. So if we can pay a 1-month back rent and help keep a family in their housing, or pay a security deposit so that a family can move out of their car and directly into a new home, that is ideal. Our second program is shelter. So if those things aren't possible and we have the space, we do have a shelter program, and that's a program Leonette really manages. We have 6 apartments that we use in the community, so families come in, they stay in an apartment. It's pretty modestly furnished with basic kitchen supplies, beds for everyone, and somewhere to sit besides that when we can make that work. And they stay anywhere from 2 weeks, and then lately, and we'll talk about why in a minute, up to 3 or 4 months or longer. And that's largely due to the lack of affordable housing. And then our third program is aftercare and stabilization. It's one thing to help someone in the immediate, but it's a whole other thing to maintain relationship and connection. We do that for up to a year to make sure that those families can remain stably housed. There are 2 other points. So our logo is the 5-point star. 2 other things that are really integral to our program. The first is that we are community-oriented. So when we were founded, families stayed actually in congregations or faith communities for a week at a time. Enter COVID and a growing awareness of trauma-informed care and family-centric services. And we thought, well, asking families to move every week doesn't really seem reasonable. And there's some racial disparity as well between the congregations where folks were staying and the racial makeup of the families who were in the programs that also kind of made it inherently racist, you could argue. So I'm happy to talk about that another time. That was a really loaded statement, but I said it. We also have partnerships with community programs like FoodLink. So we do have client choice food pantry. He used another word that I really loved, where we can provide boxes of food for families as they need them who are in our programs. What am I doing? Holy crap. And then finally is the promise, so family promise. Our promise is that we promise to do everything we can for families, and we also recognize the inherent promise in each family, and a big part of that is doing the work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have to learn more about the systems that perpetrate poverty and that perpetrate homelessness, and acknowledge that we can keep doing this work, but until those systems change, there will continue to be families who experience homelessness. Okay, I'm gonna skip 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna skip that slide. That's most of our staff. This is something that you should think about, and it's actually, I think, on the handout that you have as well. Okay, I'm gonna come back to our slide for the vision statement. So what is affordable, decent, and equitable housing? So I want you to think about what home means to you, and then what we're ultimately going for in our vision, where everyone has a home. Our hope is, we believe that home ought to be affordable, which is to say that families should be spending 30, maybe 50% of their income on housing. Most of the families who come to our programs are spending at least 70%, sometimes 90% of their income just on housing, which Nikki talked about budget earlier. Doesn't allow much money for anything else, let alone being a kid and running into McDonald's, or having spending money to go to the movies, or all of these things that we take for granted. Summer camp, right? All of these experiences that kids, I think, take for granted. The second is decent. So a lot of the homes that families are staying in are not decent. They have holes in the walls, they're missing doors, windows are broken. We could go on and on about the dismal conditions of a lot of the places that are available for families in Rochester. More and more landlords are not providing refrigerators or stoves, and so families have to find those on their own. So to have a family meal or to heat up whatever food you've gotten in a food apartheid or food desert space is really hard. And then the third is equitable. We really do believe that housing should be available to everyone, regardless of their gender, their sex, their race, their ethnicity, ability, religion, and on and on. Okay, I'm gonna look at my slides here. Okay, I want to highlight the first sort of chunk of this, which comes back to, and I really appreciated thinking about the myths and the biases that we have when it comes to folks who experience homelessness or poverty and children. There are the three top reasons why families experience homelessness. One is a pure lack of affordable housing. Families who are in the shelter program now are applying, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 places pretty easily. And there are so many people applying for these same apartments. The supply-demand is so out of whack that the stay in shelter is so much longer. The second is that below living wage pay. I'm gonna jump ahead. So again, Nikki mentioned budget. This is a very real budget for a family. Minimum wage is $13.20. So if you have a single parent household who is working 35 hours a week because that low paying job won't give them 40 hours, then they're making $2,000 a month after taxes, and their rent is $848, which is pretty low right now, actually. Rents have gone up quite a bit. All of a sudden, and you add utilities, there's a whole lot of things that aren't on that budget. And a lot of families are resilient and resourceful, and so they're going to food pantries, and they're making all of those different ends meet, but that takes so much time and energy, and I would be exhausted. I have to go back. The third, and I mentioned this already a little bit, but the third reason families experience homelessness is absolutely because of bias and racism and historic redlining in housing and education and economic inequities. Those are all very real systems that were set in place. So many of them were very intentional, even though that's so hard for us to hear. We want to believe that it was like, oops, we didn't mean to do that, but a lot of times it really was intentional. And we have a lot of work to do in order to fix those systems. Okay, I'm right at 10 minutes. Here's where I'm going to leave us, is with this quote. America is supposed to be a place where you can better yourself, your family, and your community, but this is only possible if you have a stable home. It goes so fast. Really appreciate that information, and we'll have time to get some questions in there at the end. That's great, thank you. Just want to grab one of those mics, you should be all set.
Good evening. My name is Jim Holleran, and I'm representing Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I've recruited two of our ACE volunteers, the Everetts, Pat and Bill, who just happened to be in the audience, so they ran out and donned their shirts. As you can see, we have some of our posters that we have at Builds. This is the mother of all posters because it has the QR code and all the information that you need. And if you want to donate to us, there's a code down there too. So what does Sleep in Heavenly Peace do? When you need a bed, you can imagine a kid who's sleeping on the floor, on a pile of clothes or a couple sleeping bags. Maybe they're lucky and they have an air mattress. Usually it's a couch or a chair. Our organization builds and delivers beds to kids. As a former city school district teacher, I can tell you if a kid comes in and they don't get a good night's sleep, they don't get enough to eat, they can be a mess all day. And so they really need our support. What do? We have a group of dedicated volunteers. We cut lumber. We organize work bees, which we'd love to see some of you at. We start by sanding all the wood. I run the headboard station. We bring about 7 pieces of lumber together. We have a side rail station where we build the side rails. We accept donations for a mattress, bedding, pillows, comforters. It costs us about $250 to make a bed. And then Bill and Pat are on the delivery end, and they're going to talk about that in a little bit. Let me tell you the story about a kid whose last name was Smalls. The kid's, of course, nicknamed him Biggie from a rapper. I don't know. I'm not cool enough to know, okay? Dopey old white guy. Biggie was in my class, and his mother didn't have the wherewithal to keep a tight budget, so they got kicked out of their apartment. They lost everything. Landlords are not bad guys, but they're going to keep whatever they can salvage to try and get their money out of stuff. So all his clothes, all his possessions, gone. No bed, no nothing. Now, this was 20 years ago, before we started doing our thing. Biggie could have really used us, because I know he was sleeping on a sleeping bag on the floor. He got to a new place. He got help. I think he lost their place again. Fast forward to this day and age. I was talking with some people over here. They're college students. They don't have 2 nickels to rub together. We know where all the money's going. You're just getting by. But you have your time and your talent, and you could make a big impact if you would be willing to come out and volunteer for 2 hours to sand some wood or to listen to my bad jokes and make headboards, okay? I'm going to turn it over to Pat and Bill, because they're going to tell you about the absolute joy of delivering beds to kids.
We did a delivery for a bed, and as we were taking it into the house, and we have to put it together. And as we're taking it in the house, the lady said, well, it's on the 3rd floor, you can just leave it and we'll take it up. And I said, no, we'll take it up. And she said that she was getting her grandchildren because both parents were on drugs, and she finally got custody of the kids, and they had no place to sleep. Second little story I'll tell you is we did a delivery, and the one lady said to us as we were getting ready to leave, she says, no one has ever done anything nice for my children.
Okay, that works better, right? Okay. We had a delivery on Saturday, and it was a really special one. For some reason, it was one of those cases where you knew that they were real people, but they were poor people. They moved up from Florida because they have some friends up here, and Florida was a bit of a mess, as you know, a couple weeks ago when they had all that rotten weather. So they moved up here. They knew they were going to have snow up here, but they could only fit so much in their car. They had 4 boys with them, 10, 12, 15, 17. We give beds to kids from 3 years old up to 17. So we've got these 4 guys, their mom and dad, I don't know who else, but you can't fit much more than that in a car. So they came up, they were getting their beds, they were happy. One boy was mopping the floor, one boy was doing something else. They were all busy, they were all helping. It was a good, solid family. However, they needed a 5th bed. Somebody else didn't have a bed, whether they were a family member or who it was. We had an extra bed with us in case we broke something while we were building. And so we called. The director said, give them the bed. That's the kind of thing that Sleep in Heavenly Peace does. Now a question for you. How many of you think they're mismanaging their money and spending it wildly if they have a television that the kids are sitting watching. Or they have a game set, a computer game thing that all the kids have. Do they really need that? I kind of got into a little conversation about the dad, and he was nice as nice can be. And we were talking about the safety of where they just moved into. And he said, I don't let my kids go out after dark. Street light comes on, they're in the house, period. Even the 17-year-old. Now, how is he going to keep those kids in the house if they don't have a television? If they don't speak English very well? If there's nothing that all the kids can do together? The answer? Keep your kids alive with the television set and the Game Boy set. Think about that for a minute. How many of you have thought, they shouldn't have that. I don't have that in my house. They need those things to keep peace in the family, to keep the kids inside, to keep their house together. And then they worry about the other stuff. They didn't have winter clothing. They hit the right person. I've worked at a whole bunch of these things. And nurses do those things, you know. And so our church opened up a free clothing closet recently in Spencerport, up the road from y'all. And I took over 5 coats today. You just have to be willing to see where they are, see how hard they're trying, and use your heart.
Just one last commercial. It costs us about $250 to make a bed. We currently have 250 kids on our waiting list. We are about ready to deliver our 500th bed right before Christmas. Here's our brand. I've taught in the city schools. I work at a supper program on Monroe Avenue for Blessed Sacrament Church. I volunteer in Special Olympics. This group of volunteers brings you so much joy, and they're all like-minded, nice, cool people, and they're all doing something that is going to have a great outcome. So, if you can give us 2 hours, we'd appreciate it. We have a list of frequently asked questions that I'm going to leave up here. And someplace there was some brochures that were floating around. I believe they're out here on the table. Feel free to snatch one of those. They've got phone numbers and addresses and anything that you might want to know about. And feel free to approach us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Waiting list. I wondered what your waiting list was like. I didn't expect 250, so thank you. I think this is on. Scarlett, why don't you come on up? So we're gonna kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about hygiene poverty, right?
Yes.
Yes, I've learned a new term tonight, and I'm going to continue to use that. Here, I can take that. And so Scarlett's here to talk a little bit about that. So I'll let you introduce yourself, and you can go from there.
Hello. It's on. Good evening. My name's Scarlett Ackerley, and I know Roberts Wesleyan College very well, especially the social work department. I just retired from there about a month ago, and I also retired from Rochester Regional Health about a month ago. What I haven't retired from is working at the Community Hygiene Bank. Before I talk about the Community Hygiene Bank and other people's issues, I'm going to get a little personal with you. And when you work at a hygiene bank, you talk about all kinds of personal things. Let me also say that we've built the hygiene bank with interns every step of the way. BSWs, MSWs, they work side by side with me and do everything I do. I'm going to let that go for a minute. So I want you to just think back to this morning. I want you to think about your routine. Get up out of bed. Did you go to the bathroom? You don't have to say this out loud. Just think it in your mind. I don't really want to know. Did you use toilet paper? Did you need Kleenex? Anybody brush their teeth this morning? Again, I don't really want to know. What about mouthwash? Are you really good and flossed? I have to make myself floss. I hate flossing. Did you take a shower? Did you have body wash? Ladies, did you have that oil of Olay or Dove sensitive skin? Guys, you either have a bar of Zest or you got a 4-in-1 bottle. It's got everything in it. It's got body wash, it's got deodorant, it's got shampoo, I think there's mouthwash in there, maybe cologne, I don't know, right? But you got the bottle. What else do you have? What's your morning routine? Ladies, using any makeup? Guys, ladies, razors, shaving cream. I want you to just, I'm going to stop for a minute, and I want you to just, in your mind, tick off and remember all the hygiene products you used this morning. Go ahead and do that, and I'll interrupt you. Okay. Get rid of everything but one. You can have one of those items, and you can have it for the rest of the next 2 months. What one item are you going to pick? Now tell me, what did you pick? Body wash. Body wash. Bar soap, very economical. Toilet paper. What else did you pick? Toothpaste, 4-in-1. Okay, great. You've got the one product. That's what you got for the next 2 months. You're going to get up tomorrow morning. You've got one product. You're going to brush your teeth with that 4-in-1? Toilet paper. A little tough to comb your hair with toilet paper. Ladies, what if you're having that special time and you haven't got anything? What are you going to do? You've got one hygiene item, if you're lucky. Let's talk about those hygiene items. Y'all are college students or somewhere in between. A common denominator for all of us is that we have all learned that the Dollar Tree is now a $1.25 tree. It is no longer the Dollar Tree. The Dollar General, yeah, it's general. The cost of hygiene products from 2021 to 2022 over the past 6 months has gone up at least 100%. That 4-in-1 that I used to be able to get at Dollar General for $1, if I can find it, is going to cost me $2.50. Feminine hygiene, oh, they took off the tax. They tripled the amount for a box of pads or tampons. I say those things out loud, and I know you guys are like, oh my God, I can't believe you say that out loud. We have to talk about those things. Because if we don't, girls are not going to school, and they're not going to work because they can't take care of business. Kids aren't going to school because they have no clean clothes. And you remember in grade school how gracious people are if you smell bad, right? Who wants to go to school? Nobody. They don't have clean clothes. They don't have clean bodies to smell. So it's kind of tough to integrate with the rest of your peers and everybody else. People are not applying for jobs because they don't have clean clothes, because they don't have clean bodies. We forget about our seniors. Our seniors, and I see some of us in here who have those issues. You know when you laugh so hard that tears run down your leg? That is a whole special kind of feminine hygiene we're talking about. You know what's happened. That stuff is twice as expensive as it was before. For those of you who are younger, you're laughing now, but you won't be. I trust you. Adult diapers. When you get to a certain age, things just don't work like they used to. And people can't, yeah, well, let's just talk about the adult diaper issue. You can't go out because you're going to have an accident. You can't go have breakfast with your friends. You can't visit. You can't go to the grocery store. And you smell just like the little kids do. We don't think about hygiene. We think, oh, yeah, because we all have it, right? Ain't nothing but a thing. Oh, yeah, let me go brush my teeth. I'm good. Let me go grab that bar of soap. In 2014, I was working with a group of MSW students, and I'd gotten a new job working for there was a new agency, organization was faith-based, and they wanted to inreach to the city of Rochester. And I said, what do you want me to do? They said, we don't know. I said, okay. So that team of students and I, there were 18 graduate students, did a community needs assessment for the city of Rochester, and the research question was this: what needs currently exist that are emerging that we don't have any resources for? I also asked them about, what are we doing pretty well? We don't want to duplicate services, social workers, none of that. What new and emerging need is happening that we don't even have any data on? So we got a whole bunch of different things back, and we kind of figured out what we could and couldn't manage within our organization. And by the way, childhood obesity came up way before it came out on the news. We're like, yes, good researchers. Not that that was a good problem to have, but we were really glad that we knew how to do that community needs assessment well enough to be able to identify that. The other thing we identified was this problem with hygiene. If you don't have hygiene, you have no first line of defense against disease. We don't think about that. But it's true. If you can't keep yourself or your environment clean, you're inviting germs, bacteria, disease to walk in, communicable diseases, spreadable diseases. We just went through COVID. I think we're still kind of going through it, right? We learned a lot about disease and the spreadability of disease. But rather than looking at it en masse, let's look right here. Do I have enough to keep me clean and safe from disease? Do other people? So we discovered that this gap in hygiene occurred. Why did that occur? Nobody should have a problem with hygiene. Let me tell you something. I've been a social worker for 40 years, and I didn't know it until we did this, because I wasn't involved with that particular type of issue. We all know about food stamps, SNAPs, EBT cards. So it's like, oh yeah, well, let them just pay for it with that. They can't. By federal policy, people are not allowed to use their SNAP benefits for personal hygiene, paper products, or cleaning items. I can take my EBT card and I can buy myself a $30 birthday cake, but I cannot buy a roll of toilet paper. I know some of you are taking social welfare policy and saying, really? Yeah, really, that's how it is. And we already know that people are not making enough money and don't have enough food stamps to cover basic food items. So that list that somebody did and they had $7 left, I'm thinking, okay, what could they buy for $7? Not much. Not much. They could buy 1 pack of maxi pads. That's what they could buy. Oh, not only have the prices gone up, but if you've noticed, the sizes are smaller. There's less pads, there's less tampons. It is no longer 16 fluid ounces, it's 14 or 12. So people are struggling across the board, infancy to elders, and it's having a tremendous impact on people. So we said, okay, a BSW student called it, she said, we should do a hygiene bank. Brilliant. You're not going to see literature on this. You're not going to do research on it. You're going to see anecdotal stuff. It's not published. It's not researched. It's new. It's not an emerging problem. We're just identifying it. So That's what we did. We developed a hygiene bank, a community hygiene bank. It's faith-based. And right now, that community hygiene bank lives in Brockport, New York, and serves the Brockport Central School District, though the truth of the matter is if somebody needs it, my aunt is in Albion, she just had surgery. Fine, if we have it, we'll distribute it. I don't have it to hold on to. My budget's more than doubled. Because I told you hygiene went up. It used to cost us $25 for a personal blessing bag, has 15 items. It costs us $50 for that same thing. And we do full-sized items, and that lasts about 2 months. For people, we're talking about children. I have a foster care family. She's got 10 kids. Now, foster care gives you some money. It doesn't give you enough money for 10 kids. And so we load her up. I have somebody else who has 6 kids in foster care. I do emergency boxes. Scarlett, I just had 2 kids come. You said it. My 2 grandchildren came because my daughter just got incarcerated. Okay, we'll load you up. So if we have it, we give it. We've termed the code hygiene poverty. So this is cutting edge stuff that you're hearing because it's new, relatively new. We've been running that hygiene bank since 2014. We started it in March of 2017 in Brockport. During a snowstorm, we had 11 families. We were calling students friends saying, come get hygiene. And we now have over 100 families every single time we do a distribution with at least 20 emergency boxes in between. I can't tell you what a difference it makes. People say thank you, they cry, and I want to talk about some of the other things that you all have heard. So during COVID, I don't do intakes. I don't ask them how much money they make, all that other stuff. We had to go curbside. We used to go inside. And people had a nice waiting area, and we had nice food and healthy food. We had all those wonderful things. And we asked people if they wanted to pray, or all of that. And then they could go shop for what they wanted, because I think it's so much better dignity than, here, have a box and be happy with it. I hate that. But when we were in COVID, since we've been in COVID, that's what we've had to do. We've had to go curbside and give people boxes of stuff. Everybody wants to go back in person, and maybe we'll get there. However, it makes a huge difference to people to be able to get that box of hygiene, and they've told us over and over again what a difference it makes. I give them a case of adult diapers. A bag of adult diapers costs $16 to $20. Who's got that kind of money? So a lot of the people that we serve, of course, are people that are poor by all those standards that we've heard about, but I purposely go after the working class poor. People who make just enough, $5 over that limit, and they can't get anything. And they don't make enough to live on. I go after elders. Probably 35% of our people are elders on fixed income. You know, the truth is they are cutting back on medications, they're cutting back on food, they are buying things that they shouldn't be buying, like pet food, to eat. It's not pretty. But that makes a huge difference to them, and we always do it with dignity, always. I have a code of conduct and confidentiality that is both an NASW code of ethic thing along with Christian values. Everybody gets dignity and respected, because it is difficult to get in those lines. It is difficult to say, I need. It's difficult to say, I don't have. And during COVID, we had all kinds of people come in. I remember one gal came in a Lexus, and one of my students said, oh, what's up with that? Her story is that she and her husband, who were about a little younger than me, had just both lost their jobs and had never been in a line in their life. She's sobbing. Another woman had just lost her husband, and they were both on Social Security. So if I have $2,000 and he has $2,000 and he dies, I get $2,000, not $4,000. She's crying. She said, can I come in here? I'm not married anymore. My husband just died. I said, absolutely. Children are dependent on what their parents can do or their guardians. We load them up, whatever we can, with dignity. I'll tell you one quick story. So there's a 13-year-old, and when we're doing curbside, we're yelling out, box of tampons over here, and I see a 13-year-old girl just cringing, going lower and lower in her seat. So I said, okay, we really need to pay attention to this. And so now we call them tulips, and pads are pansies, and bladder leak are begonias. So you always want to make sure that you keep as much dignity intact as you can. By the way, I've had male interns. You guys have had to learn all this stuff. There you go. You'll make great husbands. I have lots more to say. I want to tell you that over there I have a brochure. I have a fact sheet. I also have a list of all the distributions that we're doing. We're doing one November 12th through the end of 2023. So if you have someone that needs something, if you need something, Brockport Central School District, you don't have to be in there. If you need something, just come get it. If you're Robertson, come get it. We're fine. We're happy to have you. And one of these lists on the back has 10,000 ways you can volunteer. I'm happy to take student interns also, by the way. So please avail yourself of that. I hope you take our information. My business card is out there. Feel free to call me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for considering. And it was nice to talk to everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Scarlett. I've never laughed so hard. It's hilarious. So it's interesting, right, this idea of hygiene poverty. We just became aware of it last year. Carenza, she's on our leadership team, brought up this issue in schools. I'm like, what do you mean hygiene poverty? And then we talked to the school nurse, and she's like, we don't even have access to some of this stuff in school, and kids are having their period in school, and they can't stay in school because they have nothing to clean up, or they threw up, and we don't have a toothbrush to even help them out. So cutting edge, but it's been there a while, and I think we need to be really aware of it because we're all great about donating all our expired food out of our cupboards, right? But how much shampoo and conditioner do we buy and like, I really don't want that, and it just sits there. Just kidding, don't donate your expired stuff. Buy people with dignity. Right, so your breakout now, there are a couple things I want you to talk about. One, this idea of hygiene poverty, because it's probably new. Two, somebody said a quote, Beth, that quote that Beth had in purple, what was that about housing? Okay, the handout you have, yeah. It's on the bottom, right? Oh, thank you. Okay, you can think about this quote, and then there was something that Sleep in Heavenly Peace said as well that stuck out to me, and now it's eluding me, about beds and things to sleep in. So now you're going to go to your small group, and if you walked in and didn't get a number, you can adopt whichever small group looks most interesting to you. You have a poster to make. You have a poster to communicate something about what you just learned in these three. You might want your whole focus to be, I want a poster about hygiene poverty, because this is like revolutionary. I've never even thought about this concept. Maybe you want to talk about housing. Maybe you want to throw the words out about gentrification. Somebody in your group might know about that particular word. Or just the idea of a bed, right? So you need to go make a poster. When your posters are done, there are tacks. You're going to put your posters up here because we want people to go around tonight and just see what it is you learned. What do you want to communicate to others about what you just said? And there's a lot there. When we come back, we're going to hear Dr. Abby Monroe talk about the brain development. We're going to hear from the social workers, and then we'll have a big round line where you'll get a chance to ask more questions. So enjoy your breakout sessions, take some more snacks with you, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
good to you.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I don't know, I'll figure it out.
Okay. I don't like talking to mics. I feel like I am loud enough to take on the world. I feel like, not that you would see those kids, but like there's some coworkers that have children over at Alma, so. Probably shouldn't say their names because then you're gonna be like, oh, that child.
I mean, it's a small school, but I'm also new, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to learn.
But by the end of the year, you'll be like, I know
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of nice. I've never been in a small school like that, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I've only have known Churchville Chi-Li, so I haven't had the experience of working in like other districts.
Okay. Where were you before? Okay.
All right, bring your posters up.
But I love being in smaller districts.
This is not British Baker, but
Watch British Baker.
Like
No.
British Bake
British
Baker.
What one?
The Great British Baker. Oh yes, yes. I like that show a lot.
I do. I don't have that.
It makes me feel like I can do all the things.
Right?
I also am so curious. Do they bring recipes with them, or do they do
they
it
have
at the?
because they fake it like they don't. Well, come on,
But they have to because baking is so precise. So
like,
you
it's not
need
like
it.
cooking.
No. Yeah.
Baking, I've got to measure something.
Yeah. No. Exactly.
I know.
I get to hide behind this. No.
Karen, you gave me all these topics. I'm like, each one of these topics is like a full course semester of stuff, and you want me to do it in 15 minutes.
We're like, oh.
We want the dummies guide to
I know.
child development.
Hopefully I did that.
Do you want to grab your phone so we do a timer too? Or my phone? I don't know where it is.
You just need to communicate the message. Like, brain development can't be undone, right?
Trauma. Are we talking trauma?
Yes, I have ACEs coming up.
Oh,
Do you have trauma?
good old days.
I have
The
ACEs.
cumulative effects of childhood
Gotta love-
trauma. I remember
Gotta
that
love
single
some
phrase.
aces. Well, we always get the broad, like probably what that's what you're going to be doing because this is like new information, but like we never go deeper. And I'm
Well, this is not going to go deep.
No,
I
no,
got
no.
15 minutes. So I got like
But
4 different
that's
topics.
that's a gap that I see
Yeah.
definitely because it's just like, oh cool, more aces, more trauma, cool. But then I guess we get the TCIS and then we can say like, now I feel like my bio was way too long because I wasn't expecting. I didn't know what it
I know. I didn't even like include a bio in my thing. I'm like, I guess I should introduce myself.
They were like, send the bio, and I was like, okay, I'll say all these things. Send the bio. Oh.
Yeah.
We'll talk about all the things. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I dance to greet the children. You do. That you do. I know. Becky was like, wear what you wear to work. And I'm like, would I wear, I would be wearing my tie-dye sweatshirt that I wore. Did you see the tie? Have you seen those?
The black and white.
Yeah. Amanda Storetto, her friend makes them. So you can ask, if you want one, you can ask. It's $25. So you would just Venmo her friend and then she'll bring it to school. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it was ridiculous. Like, there was like 20 of us, I feel like, 15, 20 of us wearing. So it started off with a smaller group, and then I was like, I need that. So I found out who did it. Yeah, and so then I was like, I need those. And so now we took a big picture today, and so everyone who didn't get it was very jealous, and we're like, no, just go and ask. Like, it's not like that's a one-time thing. I will wear a sweatshirt any day. Okay, I'll hang on. That's what I
Okay, this one, I can tell everybody's starting to feel comfortable because it's really hard to pull everybody back. And that's actually really exciting. So I'm excited about that. But we do want to continue on with our night. We have a couple more speakers, and we recognize that we want to try and hold tight to our time frame. We also, Karen and I were talking that there's no way that everything will be wrapped up by 8:30, but we also recognize that people have places they need to go and things they need to do. You'll be able to leave as necessary. Our speakers will definitely be over by then, and we really hope that we can have the full panel and get that in before the end of the night. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Abby, and she's going to explain a little bit about impact on development and what we see with kids that are living in poverty.
Hi, so I'm Abby. I am a clinical school psychologist. I currently work at Caledonia Mumford as their school psychologist over there, so not too far away. I'm also very familiar with Pierce. I grew up here and I went to Roberts, so this is familiar territory for me. So I'm going to talk about poverty and the impact on children and mainly their development, and we're going to talk a lot about chronic stress. That's going to come up a lot, and how that impacts child brain development, how that impacts their learning, how it impacts them socially, and how it impacts their mental health. So that's going to be our agenda for my 15 minutes. I was telling Karen that each one of those topics could take a whole semester-long course, so I may be flipping through some slides quickly. We're just going to touch on them a little bit, but if you have questions later, we will have time for those. So for each one of these things, I'll be going through some different slides. Again, I might skip through some, and we'll get going. So we kind of already have an introduction, just so you're aware when I talk about the federal poverty line. It kind of varies based off of where you find your information, but the thing that I saw come up quite a bit in my research was around $26,500 for a family of 4 is considered that line. Again, it could vary, go up or down a little bit depending on where you look. But when we talk about the federal poverty line, sometimes when I talk about low income in my slides here, low income means around that poverty line, but usually a little bit above, but not much. And then when we talk about below the federal poverty line, that's families that make less than that threshold. And currently, 17% of children, or well, not currently, as of December of last year, 17% of children live at or below that federal poverty line. And 28% of families who live in homeless situations have children. So that's all things just to keep in mind and consider. And then there's also racial disparities too, just to kind of keep in the back of your mind. So I'm going to start with adverse childhood experiences, and to give you a little bit of background, the research on adverse childhood experiences started because of some of these issues up here. So these different behaviors and physical and mental health concerns that people were seeing in adults, they kind of wondered, was there any connection or any similar experiences that these people had that led to some of these issues? So we're talking, in case you can't see it super well, things like lack of physical activity, drug and alcohol abuse, missed work, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, cancer, strokes, and other health concerns. And what they found is there are 10 different types of what they call adverse childhood experiences. They fall in 3 different categories. And children who experienced one or more of these, for each one that they experienced in their life as a child, they had an increased risk for these types of issues later in the future. And when we look at what that looks like for children in poverty, we're talking about there's exponentially greater risk for these adverse childhood experiences in their life when they grow up in poverty. That does not mean by any means that that will happen or that is guaranteed, but they are at greater risk. So 1 in 10 children in the United States have 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, which is, definitely creates a lasting impact in their life. And the reason why I think when we talk about children in poverty are much more likely or at a higher risk for these adverse childhood experiences is because of that chronic stress. When you think of chronic poverty, there's chronic stress involved, and where there's chronic stress, there's more likely to have those adverse childhood experiences. So if we go back, that's things like abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction. And household dysfunction includes things like mental illness of somebody in the family or somebody in your close vicinity that you're related to, an incarcerated relative, domestic violence, substance abuse, and divorce. And this is not just in the United States. When we talk about adverse childhood experiences, we're talking all across the world. This is a problem where children in poverty are more likely to experience these adverse childhood experiences. In Brazil, children in poverty were 6 times more likely, Australia 3 times more likely, UK 12 times more likely, and in the United States 5 times more likely. And this is just kind of a slide to show that, these adverse childhood experiences can lead to things like disrupted neurodevelopment, which we're going to talk about in a second, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, health risk behaviors, disease, disability, and then eventually early death. So as we talk about chronic stress, we want to talk about how that impacts brain and brain development. And particularly, I want to focus on 4 different areas: the prefrontal cortex, so that's like right here in the front of your brain, your amygdala and your hippocampus, which are kind of in the middle. If you were split your brain in half and then go right in the middle, they're right about there. And then your temporal lobe, which is on like the side. And this chronic stress leads to an overall sense, lower like brain matter, smaller brain matter. And I have it up there. Total brain matter is about 3 to 4% smaller for those living at about 1.5 times the poverty line. So that equates to about $39,000 income for a family of 4. Income for for a family that's under the federal poverty line, that the brain matter actually decreases by about 8 to 10%. And that also means that development in these 4 areas of the brain also are not as developed, are smaller, and they don't, the neurons and the systems don't work as well. So what that means for the prefrontal cortex, that's things like problem solving, decision making, impulse control, executive functioning, so like organization, remembering details, paying attention, all things you need to be able to function in school and in life and in work. Those things are not as well developed, so kids are going to have a harder time. Your amygdala, that is your emotion center of the brain. So when you think about kids functioning so that they can control their emotions, control when things happen around them, we think of a 2-year-old when they throw a temper tantrum because they can't control their emotions. That's not well developed yet. But then think of a 12-year-old who their amygdala still isn't really any more developed or not much more developed from when they were 2 because of this chronic stress that they're going through. Then you see those same temper tantrums, but now they're bigger. And now they're in classrooms and with other kids and desks and teachers, and they're supposed to be learning, and they're disrupting themselves and their school environment because that brain area is not developed yet. Temporal lobe, that's auditory processing, object recognition, and memorization of speech. Also things you need for school, and if that's not well developed, you're going to struggle with academics. And then your hippocampus, that's memory. And if your hippocampus is not well developed, good luck on tests. Good luck learning, learning all of the things you need to learn for when you're sitting in that classroom and you're asked questions, or you're sat in front of those standardized tests where you're being asked to remember what you learned and output that onto a piece of paper. That's going to be really hard. And this is just a graph of what that might look like. The blue line is low SES, and that's the volume of gray matter over time. And you can see the high SES and the difference that gets over time as they get older. So how does this impact academics? We just talked about how it impacts the brain, and as that development is stunted. And once it's stunted, you can't, past a certain age, it doesn't get better. You can learn strategies, and it's not impossible. It's not, a sentence for they're never going to get better, but it is saying that there is a certain level that they're going to get to on their own. And so you think about all of the brain impact, and now they have lower development, but they also have things like worried about their parents. There's that chronic stress at home. They're unhappy, they're frustrated, they're anxious, they're excluded from things that they don't have access to, like we'll talk about maybe sports, maybe other activities or hobbies that they don't have the money to join in with. Insecure and overcrowded homes. They might have a family of 6 people in a 1-bedroom house. No place for homework or play. They got to do homework at home. Where are they going to do it when they've got a 2-year-old and an infant brother and sister that they're taking care of while mom and dad are at work? They're more likely to be bullied. Teachers might not always understand or might not know what's going on in their life. They might not have money to go on field trips that the rest of their classmates are going on, and so on and so forth. So that's all going to come into impact in how they learn and their ability to access their education. And so on average, children from low-income households scored 4 to 7 points lower on standardized tests than their middle to high socioeconomic status peers. And when you talk about, when you get to that like below the poverty line, those kids actually scored 7 to 10 points lower than their peers. And as much as 20% of that gap in those standardized test scores come from lack of development in their frontal and temporal lobes that we talked about just a second ago. And so just some statistics for you. Before entering kindergarten, cognitive scores for children of low-income families are likely to be, on average, 60% lower than those in the highest socioeconomic statuses. And some of these kids are in the same classrooms. You can have the lowest socioeconomic status kid and the highest in the same classroom with the same teacher learning the same thing. And how does that, they could be sitting next to each other at their desks, and how does that impact one child over the other? And then 50% of children from low-income communities start first grade up to 2 years behind their peers. So we're talking a first grader and essentially a preschooler in the same classroom. And a teacher that's asked to differentiate between the two, and that's also really hard. And so we could kind of zone in on all the different types of academics between math, science, social studies, but what I really wanted to focus in on was reading, because if you can't read, you can't really do anything else. So some interesting statistics: children from middle income or above households tend to have about exposure of 1,000 to 1,700 hours of being read to by the time they get to kindergarten. That's a lot of hours. And they tend to have about 47% of them are read to every single day. So we're talking around 50%. And the ratio of books is about 3 to 1 per child. When you look at low income or impoverished children, you're talking a ratio of 1 age-appropriate book for every 300. Many of these children, 61% of these families, don't have any books to read to their kids. 80% of preschool and after-school programs that are within these impoverished areas don't have any books for these kids to read that are within their age level. The average child in these low-income households have been exposed to only 25 hours. So you're talking a 5-year-old goes to kindergarten, has had 25 hours total read to them. And next to them is a kid who's been read to for 1,700 hours. There's gonna be a huge difference in what they can do in entering kindergarten, and they're in the same classroom, learning the same curriculum. And so one is starting out well behind the other. And 68% of America's fourth graders, this is in general, 68% of America's fourth graders read at below proficient level, which is a problem, but 82% of that 68% are children in poverty. So the majority of them are coming from these households, and this is just kind of shows the disparity. So we touched on this especially a lot with the hygiene, and we talked about it too, but when kids don't have access to some of these things and how that impacts them socially, they're more likely to be bullied, 20% higher risk of being bullied, which is going to impact their social emotional development. We also talked about how the amygdala, the emotion center of the brain, is less developed, which means their ability to control their emotions is going to be less developed. And then with their peers, that doesn't sit well with their peers. When they can't control their emotions and the rest of their friends can, the other kids don't they don't want to be around them. They don't want to play with them. Not just because they don't dress the same or have poor hygiene, but also if they can't control themselves, other kids don't want to deal with that. And I've seen it in classrooms where the kids that can't control their emotions have no friends because the other kids would rather play with kids who aren't going to upset or bother them. My clicker's not working. I don't know. I don't think I turned it off. No, it's still on. I don't know. So the last thing that I was going to talk about was mental health. And so we've talked about chronic stress in terms of adverse childhood experiences and the greater the likelihood for those things. We've talked about how that chronic stress impacts the brain and how it changes or stunts brain development in several areas that greatly impact academics and their ability to access their education, their ability to keep up with the rest of their peers and keep up with the teacher as the teacher's giving them the instruction. And we've also talked about how that will impact their ability to connect with their peers. And so when you take all of that into consideration, they're extremely more likely to have significant mental health issues, more likely to have anxiety, more likely to have depression. I do not know the statistics off the top of my head, but I promise you they're up there. So because of that, and then you got to think of the lack of access that they have. They're struggling with these things, and do they have access to mental health care? Not as much, especially mental health care. I worked at U of R. I know how much those people paid to have their kids come to the clinic. It was, I think, without insurance, about $450 per session for an hour. Insurance covers it, but if you don't have insurance, you don't have access. And so their lack of access, they have all these issues, and then they don't have the ability to do so. But what I had at the end of my presentation was, to end on a positive note, because that was a lot of kind of doom and gloom, was the statistics also show that all it takes is one positive adult in a child's life, no matter what they've been through or what they're currently going through, to change the trajectory of where they end up. And that's it. That's all it takes. So from that, I'll lead into the two social workers. But thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Iabone. I am the school social worker over at Chestnut Ridge Elementary School. Previously, I was the district-wide social worker, so I've worked from K through 12 in the district.
I was trying to set my timer. I'm Karen Mersich. I'm also a social worker in the Churchville Chili School District. I work mostly in the elementary schools. However, I've also been dabbling in the middle and high school, so I have a little experience in all of them.
So our job tonight is really to talk about what we are seeing with our students right in our community, right here, right now. And what we've noticed, we've been really interested in everything that every presenter has been saying, is that every topic that was talked about, we deal with students and families on a daily basis. So whether it's food insecurity, hygiene issues, bed issues, housing issues, these are things that we see every single day. So from that, we kind of were thinking about all the topics we talked about. So backpack program. So backpack program is something that we do at Churchville Chili. So it's in our district, we do pre-K through 6th grade for backpack program. So as it was discussed earlier, every Friday, students that parents accept this help. So every Friday, we send home a bag of non-perishable foods that is supposed to help the family through the weekend. And so one story is just to show how important this backpack program is for our families, is that I have a 1st grader whose family recently became homeless. And so they're doubling up with a family right now. And they were previously on backpack, and then at the start of the year, they were like, no, I don't think we need it. And then when they did become homeless this year, they were like, yeah, we do need it. And the student was telling her teacher, she's like, all we have, mind you, it's the end of the month too. So their food benefits are done with for the month. They didn't have any money for food. She's like, every meal is chicken. For breakfast is chicken, lunch chicken, dinner chicken. I'm sick of the chicken. And so she got the backpack food and for the weekend, and then she comes in on Monday and she looks at her classroom teacher and goes, that oatmeal was so yummy. Do you have more for me? And just imagine this 1st grader just looking at you in her eyes and asking for this oatmeal and how much that
just one bit of that food meant for her over the weekend. And from that, it's just trying to think of other things of how we can help the families, but that's just how important backpack program is, that it just helps families get by just a little bit more for over the weekend.
And so kind of like what Emily was saying about with the backpack program with parents who accept the help. So one of the barriers that we find in the school district is that there are several barriers for them accepting the help. And for a lot of different reasons. One being, kind of as has been discussed tonight, that we live in a suburban area, so people who feel or who are in poverty feel embarrassed or uncomfortable asking for help because it's not what socially they feel is acceptable. So there's a barrier there. We also have a lot of families who cannot read. So when they get that paperwork home, they don't know what they're signing. So either you have families that sign everything, or you have families that sign nothing because they're just not sure what they're signing their kids up for. Other barriers are we've had an influx of families that speak different languages, and while we try to hit every single language when we send out things, it just doesn't happen. Not every language is something that we have paperwork for. So we miss a lot of those families. They kind of fall through the cracks. We have about 31% of our student population in the Churchville Child District that are on free and reduced lunch. So 31% of the kids you see walking around Chili on a normal day, they are the ones that are highly impacted. It would be higher, but again, those barriers. Speaking of another barrier would be that a lot of families are right on the cusp. So they don't hit that poverty level, but they're that $7 at the end of the month that they have left. So they're not buying all the extra things that their kids need.
And I think what was interesting about it was that last year we had the money, the federal money that all students got free lunch for lunch and breakfast. And I don't have statistics on this, but you could just see how helpful that was for our students, because every morning there would be so many students that were getting breakfast. There were so many, every student could get the lunch that was available, and we knew that they were getting all their nutritional needs met by having breakfast and lunch in the school. This year we don't have that money to grant that, and like we said, that leads to other issues as well, meaning families may not be able to pay for their students' food and lunches. We don't do food shaming in our district, so if a student doesn't have money, they are allowed to get either the hot lunch or the cold lunch as well. So we don't say you have to get that peanut butter and jelly, so they can get whatever food that they want that day. But that bill, that bill does keep going. And I know, Karen, you have kids in the district, and you have said about the warnings.
So we get 3 warnings when we sign up for our kids for like meals. So after the 3 warnings, I'm not actually sure what happens, but parents will ignore those warnings because at the end of the day, their kid's going to get the food no matter what. So for whatever reason they can't pay that bill, it just keeps adding up throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, the school actually has to pay that back. So somewhere, the money's coming from somewhere.
And we are very lucky because we do have many churches in the Churchville Chi area that do help with other food needs over the holidays, with food pantries that they have, mobile food pantries, and we're always offering this information to our families as well, and they readily take this information. So we're just briefly doing little anecdotes. So moving forward with housing, that is something we see a lot. I am getting phone calls all the time about families being evicted, or that they are having to move, that they can't afford where they're living anymore, they're going to have to double up. And a lot of our families don't have anywhere to go either. They don't have that community or family support that they can say, oh, I can go stay with my friend with all my kids. That's a struggle for a lot of our families. I know that I had a family that was on a wait list for a new housing development apartment complex, and the mom called me the day before, and she's like, if I don't get off this wait list, I'm going to be sleeping on the streets tomorrow. If I'm not going to get this, I'm not going to be able to, me and my son are going to be sleeping in our car on the streets. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. This ended on a positive note because she actually got off the wait list, and they are now living in that apartment complex, and they're doing great. But that's not the situation for all our families. But this is a common issue that I'm getting phone calls about. I need help getting housing, I need to get qualified for different services, and like we talked about before, there is a lack of housing in our area and affordable housing as well.
And so when you think about that and you think about how that impacts kids, so they may or may not know from day to day where they're going to be. And then on top of that, just in general, you might see kids sleeping in school, and then think about that socially. So not only are they sleeping in school, but their peers are thinking like, what the heck is their problem? You know, why are they sleeping in school? So then they're ostracized or looked upon by teachers, not intentionally, but as, you know, kids that are problem kids, or that pity that we talked about earlier in the night, just, oh, I feel so bad for them, their family's so poor, but then also not doing anything to change that.
And that kind of brings us more about the hygiene and clothing issues that we experience in our district as well. We actually did start a clothing closet, and it's located in our Churchville Elementary building, and it's an elementary school clothing closet because we recognize the need, because we had families that were asking us for shoes or coats or gloves on a regular basis, so we were like, let's help that need. So we did start that, but we also see there's a lot of gaps in that as well. Especially with hygiene.
Yep, and so just a quick story about hygiene and kind of how that kind of one after the other issue that pops up because of that. I worked with a student whose family was very embarrassed by their needs, so they preferred that we not give the children anything at school. So in doing so, you know, we gave what we could at school, but he couldn't take anything home. So through that situation, he didn't have socks, something that you and I probably don't really think about because we have them. So he didn't have socks, and he had shoes that were so worn and also not his to begin with, that he ended up getting like a foot fungus on his foot. Now he has shoes that are no soles left. He has no socks. He's starting to get a foot fungus, which is like, I'll spare you the details, but it was worse than just your typical like athlete's foot. And through that, he got an infection. Now family doesn't have insurance to take him to the doctor to get the medicine. So now we have an issue where he's not coming to school because he has this foot fungus, because he can't walk on it. Now parents have to keep him at home, but they don't have food at home to feed him. So it's just one thing after another for this family based on, you know, a simple thing of he didn't have socks to wear.
And something that we didn't really discuss when we were talking about hygiene is how expensive it is to do laundry. That is a big issue that we have not been able to figure out successfully yet, I'm gonna say, because we can give clothes and we can give shoes, we can continue to give socks.
We give tons.
We give tons, but at the end of the day, if you don't have access to affordable laundry, you're just gonna keep getting clothes and the rotation is over and over again. And that's something that I have families that live in apartment complexes, and they're like, we have to go to a laundromat because the apartment complex's laundry is way too expensive and I can't afford that. So
and they don't have transportation to get there.
Yeah, and transportation is another big issue, especially in our area, but in Monroe County as well. We don't have great transportation systems here, and especially with our families who don't have vehicles to drive, it's very difficult for them to get to different providers and services and to meet their needs.
And we're running out of time, so I just want to leave you with one just story to kind of sum up the issue that we see at school, which is the cycle of it. So you have this family who's very poor, so mom and or dad are working 2 jobs at a time to try to get their kids to, you know, to get what they need in the home. So because they're working 2 jobs a day, they're also not hanging out with their children or seeing their children. Because of that, the kids, you know, they may have an issue at school. Parents can't come for parent conferences or anything like that. They're looked upon, the parents, as, you know, oh, they don't want to be involved. But in the reality, they can't be involved. They don't have the time. They have to do what they need to do to survive. And then on the flip side of that for the child, there's events after school. PTOs and Churchville Child are crazy. We do so many things. But the families aren't able to attend those things. So now you have all these social events where the kids can be making friends and learning about their peers and being able to participate, and they're not able to because maybe they don't have the money, but they also don't have the family to bring them. So then they get to school and all the kids are talking about that, and socially they have no idea how to handle that situation. So then it becomes an issue of not having friends, and it becomes a social issue in the school place as well. So it just kind of cycles, and then it expands from there. So we see it in so many different areas in school, and if we had 7 hours, we would fill your time for sure, but we just don't.
But yeah, that just really shows that this isn't just a problem in Monroe County, that this is happening in our own community as well. Thank you.
No, I just feel bad cutting people off. It's like, oh, yes, there's so much to discuss and so much to talk about. So one of the things that Karen was doing as people were talking is just filling or sending around this little form. And this is just an opportunity to give people the chance to get involved or to find out more information. Maybe you just want to find out how to volunteer with Sleep in Heavenly Peace. Or we're talking about, like, and this didn't come up yet, but I'd love to start a drive to supply Churchville Chili with hygiene products. Maybe those are some of the things that we need to be talking about. Yes, Emily's like, yes, please. So, but I know we are really short on time, but I would love if our speakers could just come up and we could get a chance, if there are specific questions that we can do. Again, I realize we are at the limit, and maybe some of our speakers even are like, I got to get out of here. But if you can stay, that would be great. If not, we also understand that we were trying to cram a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. So, does anybody have any specific questions for any of our guests that were here today? None? Yeah, Nikki's like, yeah. Any question? Oh, I'm going to bring the mic over. Look at me, I feel like I'm a game show host now.
This isn't for any one of you specifically, but poverty can be hard to identify, especially those that are close to being over the line. So how would you advise when you might think someone might or could benefit from some help, but you're not quite sure and you want to make sure, like, what if you're wrong? You don't want to offend, but you also want to be available to help. So how do you navigate that?
I don't think you really are going to offend anybody at the school I'm at because we're at 90% economically disadvantaged. But you will have people that, even if they're 90% economically disadvantaged, will still take offense to you asking them. I've sent stuff home to parents and had parents email me back saying, I don't need this, we have food in our house. So normally what I'll do is I'll email and say, hey, this is just a general community newsletter. It just gives us information about resources that we have available. Please feel free to use them. And you'll be shocked at how many of those parents, when you talk to them that way, and now half those parents that were kind of a little snotty with me in the open house are now saying, hey, do you have hygiene products? My daughter needs her hair braided. I was wondering if I could set up a clinic, set up an appointment for the hair clinic. My son needs a haircut. Can you tell me when the barber's coming in? Because they were talking to me about groceries, and I was saying, oh no, we're a community room. And nothing against saying closet or pantry. I just find that when we change the words to the food market and the thrift store at East and the braiding clinic, that people are more likely to come because they feel like it's their own store that they're coming to. It's their, it's a grocery store. They like thrifting. They're going to the hair salon. We have a hair salon on. So if you treat people with dignity, that's the key word, then I think people will be more susceptible for help.
I kind of did it with you guys tonight. I said, if you know of anybody that needs hygiene products, there's our flyer. And so I'll oftentimes talk with people that way too when they're coming in. Or can you help us spread the word about the hygiene bank? Let me tell you a little bit about it. So if you know anybody that needs it, and oftentimes they'll start telling us about different needs that they have. So I think there's nothing you're going to do to not offend people, but I'd rather say something and offend somebody than not say anything and have someone go without. Sometimes that's just a decision you have to make.
So I know for our group, one of the things we talked about was how faith has deeply impacted our responses, and I was wondering if any of you could personally answer how faith has deeply impacted your response to this issue.
Faith deeply impacts every response for me. What I work, but my Christian faith is what keeps me grounded. So I don't think of it as a job. I think of what I do as a ministry.
This ministry was not my idea. I didn't just come up with this on my own. This is God's ministry. And I was just talking to them. I don't ever freak out about stuff because it's his ministry. And he's going to let it go where it needs to go. And we're going to reach the people we need to reach. We pray together beforehand. I pray through it. I never for a minute think this is mine, because it isn't. And I never think for a minute that it's my problem to solve. And, you know, I've been a social worker for 40 years. Because the minute I think that I can heal or fix or that this is mine, I'm in trouble. And it's the same way with the hygiene bank work. And I would imagine for many of us who do this kind of work, we really understand that it's beyond our job description and that we go to him for guidance and help. It's his. I guess I'm really clear about who my boss is.
I was thinking in the introduction you talked about changing hearts and minds. And I think for me, when I've been involved in environmental justice and when I've been involved with housing justice, first and foremost is me being open to being changed first. And so I always come back to the metanoia, which is the Greek word that's used a lot in Scripture for a change of heart and a change of mind. So I think that has to be at the forefront before we go out into the world. If we're just looking to change other people, then I don't know. Stop.
Okay. My question is going a little bit off of that faith-based thing. If you are attached to a organization that is kind of tied to a church, how do you kind of reach out to people who they may practice a different religion or they may be secular to say, like, to kind of combat the fact that help is kind of tied to that kind of belief? I'm sorry, that was a poorly phrased.
So we this year have been blessed to be able to work in a neighborhood nearby that has a lot of broken families and low income. And we went over there for VBS and we started doing dodgeball with them because somebody said it, that's what it was. They just need one adult in their life to care. And so we keep showing up for dodgeball, and you got to put your earmuffs on because the things these boys say are atrocious. But then the two Muslim boys in the neighborhood saw it, and they wanted to come along. And they came to pizza, and this boy said to me, he said, "I'm Muslim. Is it okay if I'm here?" I said, "You can come. You don't have to believe what I believe. We will love you where you're at." So the thing is, a church has to be willing to open their hearts and minds. I'm not trying to change you. God's asking me to love you. God does the rest, right? Sorry, I had to butt in just because we've had that story. And these kids, I kid you not, these boys every Wednesday night are in youth group. They're Muslims. They absolutely are Muslim, but yet they're hearing the message of God's love every week. That's God's story with them, not mine, but you just got to love people where they're at. Don't change them. It's someone else's job. I just got to love them. Sorry, I didn't get to talk.
Is there anybody? I can say. So our other way, the other perspective of that is that Family Promise is a secular organization who has historic partnerships with a number of different faith communities. So Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and I think, I haven't been there very long. Leonette can maybe speak to this better, but I would say one of the, I think, beauties of faith traditions is that it's in some way giving each of us purpose, and that there is a call in every faith tradition, so Muslim, Sikh, Jewish, to care for people. And so I think as long as we keep that at the forefront of what we're doing, that's ultimately, like, I'm also a Roberts grad. Leonette's also, like, we're really represented here. It's kind of wild. I think, so I know that in the Christian tradition, that's motivated by Jesus, who did nothing if he didn't serve other people, and usually without the intention of anything other than serving other people, right? So often we have this, like, this goal of, I don't know, I'm gonna go off the rails. I'm gonna hand this out here because y'all are up to the...
No, sometimes people have a goal of going in and trying to preach to people instead of just serving them. Did I say that right, sister? Okay. So, because that's what happens. So, I mean, East High School, Upper Lower School is a Rochester City School District, and I've heard people say several times, you know, it's a secular school. But we are doing more at our school than some of the suburban schools or some of the Christian schools are doing. I had one of the students come to me they go to a Christian-based church, and someone told them, you shouldn't go trick-or-treating for Halloween. That's of the devil. It's a kid. He's in 6th grade. He wants candy. He's not thinking about the devil. So sometimes we have to, like, keep our stuff in check and do what Jesus said. Basically, I think that's what she was trying to say, but I'll just say it.
So just to add on with that, just being in a school, I'm always upfront with families when we're working with churches, and I have yet to have any backlash from the family saying like, no, you're with the church, we're not going to work with it. They've been very open as long as I am upfront and honest with them.
Sleep in Heavenly Peace has been doing this for a long time. We've got a lot of chapters all over the United States and worldwide. We don't go as a church. We individually are church people. Yes. And when I go out, I go to places, I'm a suburban white person. I go to places in the city where I shouldn't be, I think. No, that's not quite right. I should be there. God is with me. God will protect me. I am God's child. They are God's children. We are God's family. And that's how we do it.
We have a mental health clinic at our school because of U of R, so the families can come in together and receive mental health services if they go to our school specific. We also have a list of resources that we give to the parents if they need mental health and wellness. So we do a lot of collaboration with religious facilities and other nonprofit organizations, which I'll be hooking up with this nice young lady to help us with people that are in need. So especially the health and wellness, we have Ibero that comes in and they have parenting classes for the parents to come in. So it's not just about the kids, but it's about the family as a whole.
I'm going to talk about the other side of that, and that is that we are not all connected out in Brockport, as so many communities aren't. So back when we were doing things in-house, we could sit with people, do an intake. I told you I had a lot of social work students, interns who helped me do intakes, who walked with people while they were picking up their hygiene items. So we would do like a wellness check. We'd kind of do a, figure out what else was going on. We'd be able to offer them other resources at that time. All of that has pretty much, most of that has gone away since we've gone curbside. And that is, that's unfortunate. And I don't have a place where I can, I can't just say, looks like you need some parenting skills. So I think we have a vision of something that we would like to do in the next year or so to kind of develop almost a SPOA, is that still a word anybody's using, single point of entry? So people aren't having to, especially in the rural areas, I'm guessing, we don't have public transportation, man. If you don't have a tractor or a lawnmower, you're going nowhere. So you can't go like from, this building to that building and 3 roads down and make another appointment. We'd like to put something under one umbrella because that is a serious gap, I think, in continuity of care.
Okay. So in Churchville Chi-Li, we do have a collaboration with Strong Behavioral. We have a clinic right on our campus, so that's someone that we work closely with. We also, as our jobs as our social workers, we work very intensely with families and working with parenting skills as well. We do refer out to other agencies, like Parenting Village is somewhere that we refer to, Mental Health Association are different providers that we talk to as well. We have done after-school programs for family in the past for therapeutic crisis intervention for families. It's what it's called. It's a Cornell training, and it helps with parenting skills as well. So our mental health team, not just social workers, the counselors and our psychologists in the building are a huge asset, and we try to work really closely with those families. But there are gaps because nothing is ever perfect, so we're still a work in progress.
Sleep in Heavenly Peace is kind of lucky because we don't do all that stuff that you guys, we aren't professionals. But we take extra people on our builds. We have everything cut out, ready to put together at the houses. The families can see that we're putting them together, but the guys kind of tend to do the building, and the women make the beds, pillows, blankets, cuddle blankets, all that stuff. And we have a chance one-on-one to talk to the women of the house. Usually the men are off working or doing something, I don't know, or non-existent, yes. So we have quite a bit of time while they're building beds to check things out and just be women together, and it works.
That is awesome, and I could listen to this literally all day. And so a couple things. If you filled out a card, even if you want more information, like you are really interested in any one of these, put your name and your email on there, and then a separate email will go out to say, oh, there's 20 people interested in that, how can we connect them up? Or if you just want to be part of a conversation about how do we stock our schools, how do we help tackle hygiene, put it on there, and then separately we'll send out to that group. Maybe we'll get back together and say, let's brainstorm, right? Grassroots, let's figure out what it could do. I have this like vision, I don't know why, that a family video down there that's been empty like a year. I would love to see like a community service in there. It's like from God's mouth to someone's ears in this room. Wow, see, I knew. It was an affirmation for you. So what I wanted to do, and I'm going to be honest about this story, because I was so mad at Walmart today. And right, you go to Walmart, right, a lot of stores, this is just, oh, sorry, because I could have really gone off about Walmart today. But number one, right, they don't use a lot of self-checkout in the Gates Walmart. And I realized they probably don't, right, they probably don't a lot have debit cards, right? But I have to go to the regular checkout line today because I want gift cards, because I want to give them to them so they can use them in their community, right? And I thought, you know, I really want to give them each two $25 gift cards, right? That is 18 gift cards. And I'm in line, and there's a woman up there, and she is taking forever because she's making them ring up one thing at a time so it doesn't go over what she can afford. Right, but I'm irritated, right? I'm a terrible person, right? I'm irritated, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my husband made me mad, and I gotta be at this thing tonight, and it's about poverty, but I'm irritated. So I got up there, and I'm like, and the guy, he's like new. It's like, and I'm looking at everybody behind me is really irritated now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for 18 cards. So tonight I'm giving you thank you cards that only have a $25 gift card in it, and you should know it was meant to be 50, but I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So we want you to pay it forward. You're gonna come across someone in your lives, I have no doubt, that can use that, or you can stock a thing, or you can buy some bedding. So we want you to use it for that, and then I will get you the other 25, just not today. So I wanna give all of our speakers a round of applause. I'm so excited. And if you want more information from Abby, Abby has a whole PowerPoint, and I was like, I could have listened to that, like, fascinated. I felt like I was in a college course. I wanted to write a paper on it. So thank you for everyone that stayed. We look forward to this journey together. We're not just Pierce Congregation or Roberts of the school. We're a community of people who can really make a difference in kids' lives, and it just takes one. One kid can change the world. Maybe that's the one you make a difference in today because you love that kid when no one else would, right? So have a great night. If there's anything over there you want, oh yes, there are handouts over here if you didn't get them. There's some here. The U of R one is the one from Nikki for Food Pantry. There's Sleep in Heavenly Peace. There's some on the community hygiene banks over there, so pick up whatever you'd like and take a free green pen if you're short on one. And we look forward to having future conversations. Oh, if you are a college student and you know someone who could really use some food, take some with you. I know there's boys over there like are dying for